World history and geography, good day to you. And this will be fairly short. We're going to talk about Ronald Reagan today, a president that I got to live during his presidency, a guy that I still admire to this day. He was a great president. Um, I mean, if you love President Trump, he was right up there with Trump, maybe even better. I mean, it's going to be a toss up. I have to wait to see, if Trump gets reelected after 8 years. I will tell you if I like which one I like better. But both of them superb. But Ronald Reagan was a former movie actor. He had been in movies, Bedtime for Bonzo. He was also in one where he played the Gipper, which has to do with Notre Dame and the famous line, "Go out there and win one for the Gipper." He played that role. He played several. He called baseball games on the radio. Well, 2 balls, 2 strikes. Here comes the pitch. That type of thing. So he had a great communication. He's called the Great Communicator. And he also believed in America exceptionalism, American greatness. He loved America. He loved America's people. He thought that, we've had Jimmy Carter. The economy has gone kaput. And Ronald Reagan wants to turn all of that around. He wants a better day for America. He wants to bring Christian morality back to America, Christian values back to America. And so he is elected in a landslide over Jimmy Carter. I mean, just Jimmy Carter was waylaid in that election. Now, we mentioned the Iranian hostage situation or hostage crisis. They would not release them under Jimmy Carter. When Reagan was being sworn in, "I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear," or "I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear." When he was being sworn in, the Iranians released the American hostages. And a lot of historians believe that they were scared because here's this guy that's played cowboys in movies, and they're scared that, hey, if this guy, once he's president, if we still have the hostages, he may bomb us. He may throw a nuke over here and we're done. So they released the hostages. So it started out great with Ronald Reagan. But as I mentioned, he wanted to return to values. He wanted to stop abortion, all kinds of great things. And he stood against communism. Ronald Reagan did not like communism at all, and he called them out. He said they were an evil empire. He would call them that to their face. He did not like communism. He believed in capitalism. He believed in democracy. He believed in our republic. And it was really, really cool to see. And during his presidency, the church grew and Christians became more vocal about their faith, which was great. Reagan believed in less taxes by the government, less government regulation, and creating a climate where business could do its thing. He said that the scariest words that you can hear from the government is high, or scariest words you can hear in life is, "Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." He was not a big believer in government. He believed that the mom and pop stores and the businesses and the corporations could make our economy work. He lowered taxes on them, where you have more money. If you don't pay as many taxes, you have more money to spend, and if you're a business, you have more money to invest in that business and hire more people and make more products, all of those things. And it worked. It worked well. In fact, during Reagan, we had the largest time of peacetime prosperity in our nation's history. Very cool stuff. He wanted to bring the traditional values of church, family, all of those things back. It became known as the Reagan Revolution. And your book talks about that. The Reagan doctrine was this: he believed in stopping communism before it could attack and enslave a country. That became known as the Reagan doctrine. He actually went into Grenada. Fidel Castro, we've mentioned him in Cuba, terrible dictator. He was going to invade Grenada. Well, Ronald Reagan got wind of it, and guess what? Ronald Reagan went in and took care of business. And he had armed forces from America and neighboring countries, and they rounded up the Cubans that had gone there in advance to attack Grenada. Took care of business. He did not like communism. Also, he appointed several justices, 3 justices to the Supreme Court. One of them, oh, by the way, all 3 of them were conservative. They believed in American values. They believed in the Constitution. One of them was Sandra Day O'Connor. She was the first woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court, which was pretty cool. He also worked with space travel. You know, we landed on the moon at the end of the 1960s, before 1970, and we went to the moon several times. Space travel had kind of ceased. And he supported something called the space shuttle. Now, space shuttles were all during my life, you know, when I was your age, space shuttles were really exceptional, and they stopped flying them a few years ago. I hated it, and I'll be glad when they come up with something different. The space shuttle was a plane, looked like an airplane. You'll see a picture on page 257. I'm sure you've heard of the space shuttle before. But basically, it would take off on the back of rockets. The rockets would drop back to Earth. The fuel cylinder, that big orange thing in the middle, you couldn't paint it because the paint would be so heavy, is the reason why they didn't paint it. They would drop back in the ocean. We would get them, carry them back, fuel them up, fix them up. We'd be ready for the next flight. And when the shuttle came back to Earth, it landed on a runway like an airplane. Cool stuff. Had one problem. The Space Shuttle Challenger, and you're going to see a short video on that today as well, on one on Ronald Reagan. But he badmouthed communism a bunch. He said it was an inefficient economic system. He called them the evil empire. I'm going through your book now to make sure I've covered everything. And the evil empire, Soviet Union, was collapsing economically. We talk about not finding toilet paper here. In Russia, you couldn't find toilet paper or food. It was a tough time for them because the economy was bad, because communism, as we've said, does not work. He went to Berlin. Berlin built a wall to keep people in East Berlin in a communist section because they were wanting to leave. They wanted to get to West Berlin, the free section. He told Mikhail Gorbachev, he said, tear down this wall. And it would fall a few years later. Now, the way that communism stopped, pretty much, is in many historians' opinion, is Ronald Reagan wanted to do something called SDI. It was Star Wars. It's the Strategic Defense Initiative. Basically, we put some lasers in space, and if you shoot a nuclear weapon at us, we zap it down. It never hits us. And the Soviet Union knew that if we built that or even started the program, they were going to have to start one, and they didn't have the money for it. And that was the start of the downfall of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union just could not keep up because communism does not work. Your book on page 258 talks about communist perestroika, desperate to save the Soviet Union from complete collapse. Mikhail Gorbachev, now he's the Russian premier that had the birthmark on his head. You may have seen him before. He agreed to reduce Soviet weapons strength to free the enslaved nations of Eastern Europe and to stop encouraging revolution and bloodshed throughout the world. So Reagan got him to concede some, and just a couple of years after Reagan left office, the Berlin Wall falls and the Soviet Union falls, and we now know it now as Russia. And the problem was, listen, once some of these Eastern Soviet bloc nations started tasting freedom, they got rid of some of their communist leaders. Once they understood freedom and saw how good it was, they couldn't go back. They would not go back. And so that's how that worked. Now, watch those two videos that you see there. And then on Monday, we are going to talk about advances in freedom. It's section 14.4. We've got 14.4, 14.5, and 14.6 to go in this chapter, and then we will be done with this chapter. So it looks like we could have a test, 14.5, 14.4, 5, and 6. We could have a test next Thursday, open book. So keep that in mind. Listen, make sure you've got all your work turned in. I know a couple of you are lacking a couple of assignments. Make sure you get that done. I don't want to put a 0 in the grade book, but I will. Don't mistake me for not be going to do that. I will put a 0 in there if I have to. So make sure you get it done, please. No assignment today, but make sure you watch those two videos. I think you'll like them. They're interesting and short. Have a great weekend. Love y'all. Praying for you. And we'll talk to you on Monday. Tomorrow is Good Friday. So we're off.